What if, instead of showcasing our college degrees, job accolades, and prestigious awards, our resumes dared to list our detours, dead ends, failures, and employment gaps? What if that list of all the scraps and screw-ups of our careers is where the real seeds of possibility lie?
Our work lives will not be about building on strengths and moving from one success and certainty to another. Instead, this cycle of transformation requires a time of disorientation, of unknowing, of uncertainty. This is the process of transformation, of change, of growth. It's not a straight, linear path. Franciscan priest Richard Rohr speaks of it as order, disorder, and reorder. Theologian Walter Brueggemann believes we experience change through being securely oriented, then painfully disoriented, and then being surprisingly reoriented.
So we offer up the muddy mess to showcase that nothing is wasted. Every experience counts and creates the conditions for new life and growth. The scraps, the leftovers, the discarded stuff, its richness is the fertile soil for new life to take root. Even in the times we've been hurt, disappointed, let down, these shitty experiences make way for new learnings. Here's author Simone Stolzoff's contribution to the shit pile. We were just wondering if you had any specific moments of a detour or a manure-like experience that was really formative for you and how you think about work and this idea of a good enough job.
Yeah, I've had many. A quick detour to my detour. There's this op-ed from the New York Times by Alain de Botton, and it was, I think, the most read op-ed of the year. It was published in 2017 or something like that. And the headline was, "Why You'll Marry the Wrong Person." The argument was essentially that, especially with something like romantic love, we have these lofty ideals of trying to find a partner that will complete us, to try and find sort of the soulmate or the one out there. And just that expectation alone creates this massive room for disappointment. It's that same sort of happiness equation. And so Boutin argues that rather than asking who is the perfect person for me, a better question is asking, what type of crazy am I willing to put up with? Or what type of crazy am I? Seeing the way in which we are all flawed and broken individuals. And I think a similar framing is good career advice. What type of suffering are you willing to put up with? I think right now, I work for myself. I'm self-employed. I'm an author. There's lots to romanticize. But even in this sort of outwardly sexy job that I have, there's a huge level of insecurity and downside and loneliness of doing incredibly solitary work, wondering whether anything I have to write is any good. The task of writing itself is strenuous. It can often feel like pulling teeth. And I think that exists in any line of work. When I worked in design, there was a big question of, am I just a corporate sellout and I'm doing a marketing campaign for Meta? And does that make me a bad person? When I worked in advertising, similar questions. When I worked in food, it was, am I sacrificing too much stability and security just to work in this field that I think is good for the world? For listeners, it's important to keep in mind that every line of work comes with its own trade-offs. And rather than think just about the dream or the ideal that we aspire to, it's very useful to think about what trade-offs am I willing to put up with? And so rather than asking people what their dream job is, maybe it makes sense to start with the manure and say, what type of shit are you willing to hold?
Yes, I love this. Thank you for that framing. It's beautiful in the dirtiest, grossest way. But thank you for that. I love that.
And there you have it. What type of shit are you willing to hold? What are the trade-offs you're willing to make? What does that personal sacrifice look like? And what is the context in which I'm making that sacrifice?
What are you willing to put up with? Because to Simone's point, there is no dream job, and there shouldn't be. We should be diversifying who we are beyond work. And it's okay to settle for a good enough job when you get to decide who you want to be in this world. For more, make sure to listen to our longer discussion with Simone Stolzoff.